we are going to call this meeting to order. Good morning. Can you see that? So,
yay!
Hello?
Yes, she can.
yes, we can. Yes, we can is my theme today. We will get to our inspiration in just a moment, but our August 17th is coming up, and that is an auspicious day in the lives of many women because it signifies 100 years since we were given the right to vote after maybe 50 or 60 years hammering on the men of our country. So,
Nice bunch of guys, huh?
yeah, and that's just white women. I mean, we had a lot of other people to bring into the loop. So anyway, August 17th, next month, don't you forget it. Anyway, with that, I would like to introduce Fred Walter, one of our socialites, to provide an inspiration today. Fred, are you muted? Yes, you are.
Here I am. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. So I thought this was appropriate. Look around you. Everything changes. Everything on this earth is in a constant state of evolving, refining, improving, adapting, enhancing, and changing. You were not put on this earth to remain stagnant.
Nice.
End of lesson.
Thank you, Walter.
Particularly inspiring, considering it's like we take 2 steps forward and we move back 4. So coincidentally, Rotary's, in addition to Rotary opens opportunities, one of our the themes this year is adaptability. We've got to adapt to these changes. So I look forward down the road to hearing how people are doing that. So Colleen, would you please introduce our guests, visiting Rotarians, anybody of that ilk?
I will. I believe our guests, our one and only guest, well, we have 2, but our Rotary hope to be soon guest is Tom. Tom, do you want to turn your video on for a second and wave to everybody so we can see your beautiful face? Yay! Welcome again. Tom's like that guest that never goes away, but he needs to become part of the family.
You need to figure out how to do that.
Rich, will you wave to everybody so we can see who you are? There we go. And those are our 2 guests today, I believe. Anybody else want to claim to be a guest? No? Okay. Those are my guests for you, Miss Nancy.
Thank you, Colleen. The other thing I wanted to mention about Yes We Can is we, on the first meeting, I put forth some goals that we, the board has adopted for this year, and I'm not going to go over them right now. But when I went to our storage unit, I found this beautiful presentation that was written by Will when he was president, affectionately known as P. Willie, a name given to him by Andy. He had put together a presentation to Rotary International to show them that we had accomplished all of our goals and for the year that he set out. And I'm hoping when he's back on to talk about these and to tell us how he did it, because it's quite a beautiful presentation. Anyway, so that's part of my Yes We Can message today. So with that in mind, I would like to call on our committee chairs to talk about some of the projects that they have going on. But first of all, Terry Tremblay, who is our treasurer, is going to talk about the budget this year that the board approved at our last board meeting, and we wanted to share that with our membership. So Terry? Take it away.
All right. Well, thank you, President Nancy. I'm going to try to put up a condensed version of the budget. Did that work? Can you all see that the budget I put on the screen?
Yes,
Yes, you can see it. Okay.
I can see it.
All right. So the full budget, of course, is very detailed, 3 pages long. This is a condensed budget that was put together in factoring in all the unknown, the uncertainties for the coming year. But you can see here briefly that I've highlighted in yellow the operating income and the operating expenses budgeted for the year. And you can see that the operating income exceeds the operating expenses by about $400. So that's a good thing. The goal usually is to try to match those two, and this budget accomplishes that. The next item, next category really is fundraising expense. I mean, income and expense, and that's highlighted in green. And you can see that we are forecasting that there'll be a bike tour in the coming year. And of course, the July 4th, there was some income from the event we just had, and there'll be another one really in Larry's year, but part of that income flows into Nancy's year. So the net fundraising number is about $10,000 in income. And then of course the club operates its programs, which are things like Wonder League, the Teacher Appreciation Breakfast, Interact, RILA, and so forth. And that program doesn't generate very much money. So it has a loss of about $9,000 and is funded through the fundraising efforts. And this budget then is calling for having about $1,000 available for community donations that are not identified. So we end up with a balanced budget for the year with $850 positive. So in a nutshell, in a 2-minute brief talk, that's our budget. I don't know if there's any questions or if anybody wants to go over it at a different time in more detail. I'm certainly happy to do that, but that's it.
Thanks, Terry. I know that I'm one of those few people who look at spreadsheets and absolutely am in heaven, but I know 99% of the people do not feel that way. So feel free to ask questions offline or something comes to mind. We are operating on a thin budget this year, but we are going to come up with some ideas to try to do some things virtually if we can't get together in person. So thanks, Terry.
Okay.
No questions? Okay. I mean, we'd be happy to open up the very detailed budget if you want. Someone have something? Okay. So Lance, did you want to talk about the recap, or do you want to put that off for another week?
I'm going to put that off for another week. Yesterday got really busy. Although actually, speaking of recaps, I will share something that Dan sent me real quick, sort of by way of demonstrating that youth are not a complete lost cause. We got a lovely thank you letter from Marta, thanking us for the wonderful visits. And appreciating us, inviting us all to use her as a tour guide if we ever find ourselves in her part of Germany. And plus she made a parting donation to the club. And she did it all in a handwritten letter, which I think is truly unique for someone of that generation.
In cursive.
She's a real special young lady. Yeah, so Lance was going to provide us with a recap of his year as president and the contributions we made and the projects we accomplished. So we'll be hearing from Lance next week.
President Nancy?
Yes, past President Andy.
Just a quick comment. I should have done this last week when Leslie Palmieri was on the meeting, and it didn't occur to me at the time, but a special thank you to Leslie. She's been the inbound coordinator for the exchange program, and she's the one that has been finding host families for our exchange students. And she's also the one that touches bases with them on a monthly basis to make sure that they're safe and being well cared for and having a positive experience. So a big thank you to Leslie. And for the rest of you, Leslie's going on to other opportunities, so we do need to replace Leslie. If anybody is interested in being the inbound coordinator, fun job, let me know. Thank you.
Yeah, that's an important role that we're going to need to fill for this upcoming year that will really take hold in 2021, but the pre-work of getting the host families is huge. Leslie has been hired by the city of Cloverdale, by the Cloverdale Unified School District as a teacher. As you know, she was studying to become a teacher, and she's been hired, so she cannot be in our meeting. So that's why she's moving on. But anyway, Sean has an update for us on his plans for Wonder League. Are you ready, Sean?
I am ready.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone. And my name, if you don't know it, is Sean Shields. And I am the, in lieu of another name, running the Wonder League. And it's
Sean, we lost you.
You muted yourself. I'll be speaking on behalf of Sean. Wonder League is going to be so great this year. I can't wait.
It is. Thank you, Colleen. I don't know how I got muted, but anyway, it doesn't really matter. The two people that really I have on the team is myself and Larry Mills. Larry Mills has been really a joy for me to have, and you know, when I get some crazy ideas, I bounce them off of Larry to see if they're practical. And there's some other people I want to swim. And I would like to just right in front thank some other people: Archie, Jack, Lee when he shows up, Colleen when she shows up. No, seriously, I really appreciate it. I couldn't have done it without you last year. This year, to make a long story short, we got shortchanged. I'm in the process of rebuilding our relationships that we had. I had a relationship with the school district, both Healdsburg, Cloverdale, and Windsor, and those have kind of slipped off because of the virus. But I plan to rebuild those. So quickly, let me tell you what we're going to do. The mission of the club, of our team, really is every child deserves a chance to play baseball. And our goals, and the goal of the program is to have a baseball team designed for children with special needs. So I will be calling on individuals. I have some actually lined out that I would like to work with for this, for 2020. And I will be talking to each one of you. But if there is someone that would like to join, please feel free. We play every Saturday starting in April through June, a couple of hours on Saturdays. And the final thing I'll say is since this is a special group of people, we don't score the game. We don't have rules. Well, we do have rules. I shouldn't say that. We have special rules. Everyone hits, everyone gets on the base, and it's just a place that you can spend a summer's day for a couple hours with parents, with kids, and just showing what the Rotary really is all about. And that's what the Rotary is supposed to be about. It's supposed to be about helping people. Thank you.
Thanks, Sean. Sean also mentioned he wants to do a little more playtime with the kids, like where you just sit around, throw the ball, you know, kind of like we did when we were growing up. Just throw the ball, practice batting, you know, just kind of get into the groove of that part of baseball. Bob Mosby, our wino, our resident wino. Where are you? Oh, there you are. Bob wanted to talk about our wine tasting group that we're forming.
All right, I am very happy to announce that the wine tasting group is up and running. We have at the moment 6 stellar members of the group. That includes Chris Call, Larry Mills, Diane Bucher, Steve Rude, myself, and Nancy. So we have room for a few more, and I would encourage anybody who is in the least interested to at least sign up and come to the first tasting. This first tasting, we're sort of aiming to have the latter part of August, depending upon what happens with shelter in place, etc. And both Diane and Steve volunteered their wineries as places where we can do our tastings outside with proper social distancing. So that's quite wonderful. Being as how it will probably occur in August, a warmer month, the tasting will probably be Chardonnays, which is more, I think, appropriate for warm weather type tasting. And I'm going to put this tasting on, and I will be putting in this tasting at least 2 Chardonnays that have been rated 100 points. That's perfect by Robert Parker, who is a very famous rater of wine. So if you're at all interested, sign up to come to the first tasting and see what we're going to do. I think everybody will have a great time doing this. So that's it.
Thank you, Bob. And we have one of our socialites who is going to talk about some ideas that Bert and Fred have for socials that we can do safely. Where is Mr. Terreri? I know I saw him here.
Yeah, I'm in my witness protection mode. I just have to disguise my voice. You can see I'm sort of in the dark here.
Oh, there you are.
You can tell who is really speaking. Good morning, everybody. I talked a little bit about assigning different groups and hopefully getting together in small groups, but then things have shifted maybe even dramatically since that time, so it was a little premature. But I'm going to be sending out an email, and I'm going to still assign the groups, and then I would just encourage each of the groups to get together through Zoom or any way that they can. It's about connection, not about being in person. And so I would just encourage you to do that. We're going to go forward with assigning it out. And maybe there can be some communication back to the group about some of the things you learned about each other. I'm looking forward to meeting new members because there's a lot of people that I really don't know well in the club at this point. So I don't have anything else. I just wanted to let you know I will go ahead and assign the groups. I was sort of holding to see what was going to happen, but again, I think we just need to try to be connecting in these small groups when we're away from the meetings, and keeping the friendship and the fellowships going. So, thank you.
Thank you, Bert. And Fred, are you drinking wine?
You're muted, Fred.
But nice.
Coffee.
So I have we already had a few announcements, but is there anyone else who has an announcement that they'd like to make? Oh, I see Dr. Marguglio is on. Hi, Paul.
Hi, Nancy. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Oh, I'm fine, thanks.
How is retirement going?
Well, in this day and age, it's sort of weird, but with my friend Rich Mucci, who you're going to see, we're playing a lot of golf.
Oh, good. Well, I hope to see you out there. That's something else we need to do, everybody, is get on the golf course. So masks. I wanted to, oh, let me share my screen real fast. Let me find my my mask thing here. That's Colleen's theme song. Okay, here we go. I don't know if you can see this. I'm asking who needs a mask, and I'm showing that Mark, Chris, Duffy, Lance, Leanna, George, Kent, Bonnie, Philippe, Archie, Jack, and then Bob Mosby, Dan Petrick, Steve Rudd, Bert, and Fred all need masks. Would you guys like me to mail these to you at this point, or you want to swing by and pick one up? They're lovely. As you can see, they've got the Rotary logo. So let me know individually how you'd like to get these so I can get them to you. Okay. Craft Talk schedule. I sent everyone a list. So I would ask that you please review that and let me know if you, pardon me? Oh, that was me interrupting. Yeah, just let me know if you want to change the date, but I will be holding you to that. And are there any committee meetings that are scheduled that anybody would like to share with the group coming up? Okay, I are going to be having a bike tour meeting next Wednesday. So I will reach out and let people know if you're interested in joining that. We just need to figure out where we're going with that program. So with that comes our next exciting moment. Who are you? Walter, come on down. You're on mute.
Okay, so it's my turn?
It is your turn.
Okay, let me start my timer here. So I'm supposed to be giving a craft talk today. And this is going to be a little different than most craft talks I've given because I'm going to update you on what's happened over the last 7 months in my life. For those of you who don't know me, I'm an attorney. I have a practice that is as narrow a niche as you can get in the law. I specialize in occupational safety and health defense. We like to joke around and say that we represent the Simpsons, Mr. Burns, before the Cal OSHA Appeals Board. I've been doing that work since 1983. I've been a member of the American Bar Association's OSHA committee meetings, OSHA committee, for the last 25 years. And I was in partnership with Lisa Prince from 2006 until just a couple of months ago. On January 27th of this year, Lisa came into my office and handed me a written, formal notice of withdrawal from the partnership. Came as out of the blue. She apologized that she hadn't been quite forthcoming with me about her feelings, but she wanted to strike out on her own, and that she would be taking the entire staff with her. I thought everything was going swimmingly. We had an infrastructure that had been built up over the last 20 years and was like the proverbial well-oiled machine. So all of a sudden, I was faced with a real dilemma, and I realized how much of our egos are wrapped up in what we do and not necessarily who we are. And as much as I would tell myself that, it led to some real deep, I wouldn't say depression, but searching and reconsidering life goals. My first thought was, this is a golden opportunity for me to retire. I've been doing this long enough. Frankly, it's getting a little old. It's not repetitive so much. There's always something new going on, but still in all, it's the same thing day in, day out to some extent. So retirement. And that's when Lisa said, we are not going to take your clients with us. You'll have to find new homes for them. And the reason was that we were all Lisa, me, and our associate, Lisa Bayaki, were all pretty burned out. We were so successful that we were running at, each of us, at about 120% capacity. We had no more energy or ability to really handle the files the way we wish they'd be handled. And Lisa's response to that was not to find somebody whom we could hire in at a decent salary, but to just simply cut and run. And I'm being a little bitter about it, but that's pretty much what happened. So I was faced with the idea that, you know, if I retire, I just have to write letters to all these folks, all of my clients, and tell them they have to find a new home, they're on their own. So that's when I decided that I could not retire. I had to continue practicing, if for no other reason than to provide them with a soft landing into a new practice, a new set of attorneys. And so that led to trying to find a firm for me to go to. I have about, at that time, I had about 40 clients and 68 active files, which is quite a bit for my kind of practice. And I decided that I wanted a firm that had an office in San Francisco. There certainly were none in Santa Rosa that I would consider, because I needed backup. I needed support from staff who understood the OSHA system. So I needed a firm that did OSHA defense work, and I needed one with an office in San Francisco. And looking at the ABA's OSHA committee list, that led to me to conclude that there were 3 firms that I might approach. And as luck would have it, long story short, I got in contact with Eric Kahn, who is the lead partner at Kahn Maciel Carey, based in Washington, D.C. And what Walter and Prince was in California, a small boutique focused on Cal-OSHA work, Kahn Maciel is on the national stage, focusing on Fed-OSHA, mine safety, and other, OSHA-related practices. And I see I'm at the end of my 5 minutes. That's the good news is that Bert Terreri has a roommate now. I've leased a spot in his firm, and I'm working out of it daily. I'm back in Healdsburg and don't have a 17-mile one-way commute to Santa Rosa anymore. That's the good news, really good news. And I'm working with a bunch of people that I am finding are delightful, supportive, and all's well that ends well. So that's my 5.5 minutes of fame. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred. This explains a lot of why we haven't seen your smiling face for a long time. And I know you were under a lot of stress, and I appreciate your sharing that with us. I'm just really glad to have you still with us and in our fold. And I look forward to some socials with you. You know, Fred is a master mixologist.
No, please no.
You work at it. And I know that
I try.
Well, and Carl's wife is a mixologist too. So maybe at some point we can have a mixologist off or something.
Yeah.
Well, actually, Leanna is a mixologist professional. She can join us. We can teach cocktails at one of these things.
Well, that would be fun. I didn't know that about Leanna.
That was my understanding. Maybe I'm wrong.
She's shaking her head no.
Okay, very well.
Oh, go ahead.
I was thinking of a different Leanna. It's not me.
Okay. Who am I thinking of? The one who lives in Cloverdale?
I live in Cloverdale. I'm not a mixologist.
Okay.
But you would be
My
willing.
son's a sommelier.
No, that's Bob's role.
All right. Well, if there are no questions of Fred, I will pass this on to our wild thing, Colleen. If you have any recognitions or happy dollars that you would like or announcements.
Thank you. Well, Dan Petrick is not on our call today, sadly. I think we should all summon how much we think we should have him pay for his birthday, since he deemed not to. I think $50 sounds like a good even number for Dan to pay to acknowledge the joy he feels at turning another year older.
Well, I will let you make that presentation to him. How's that?
I will. Before I start recognizing individuals, would anyone like to step forward and tell us something exciting? And, you know, Fred, I'm sure you'd like to give us some money because you found a new home and you feel loved and appreciated. That's worth something.
It is worth something. The revenue stream is lagging. So if I can defer.
You can, or you can put wine to the store that we have going that is being run by Ed.
Can I do what now?
Ed is running a store for us that we're gonna like auction off and do things with. So if you would like, you could donate a bottle of wine to Ed's store, which already has some of Ed's lovely olive oil in it.
No, it has some beautiful jams, which I have a list of what they are. They're quite interesting.
Instead of money, we're going to have some fun and donate product or wine or things like that. And we'll have kind of we won't have we'll have a auction like they did with George Dutton's whiskey about 8 months ago.
Okay. Let me look around. I think we have a bottle of Barnyard Red out there that I can donate.
Nice.
Colleen was also going to offer the opportunity to wash my car as a recognition. So that's also an option. So
correct, Fred.
I think Bert's right across the street from you. I'm sure he'd love to do that.
Bert, you just got thrown under the bus, buddy.
I'll just drive over to Bert's. So now, Colleen, we're in a couple minutes here. We're going to have Edward introduce Dr. Mucci, but do you have any announcements or anything that you would like to talk to the club about?
I do. So I am going to share this with my family of Rotary, and I'm asking, because of our 4-way test, if you would all hold this information at least until the weekend. And that is to let you know that I have resigned my position with Reach for Home, but I will be staying until the end of December because I want to make sure that we have a smooth transition. And I sold my ranch up north. I think you all kind of heard me talking about that. I'm going to be renting my home here and moving on to another state, probably either Oregon or Washington, but I'm in the midst of looking at properties right now, but I just want you to know I did it because I've been studying trauma for this past year and the effects of trauma on the brain. And I just feel like I can't keep dealing in the land of effect of childhood trauma. I want to get to the cause and to work on putting something, I hope, in our school systems to help children overcome and manage trauma, as well as build their self-esteem and their ability to care for themselves, because the effects of all that I've seen with working with the homeless comes from an inability to treat those people properly. That were damaged children. So that's my hope and wish, and I hope to form a new company and start working on that in the next year, but I'm going to take some months off so I can just reset myself. But I just wanted to say thank you to all of you guys, because you've been so tremendously supportive of me and my work. It was a very difficult decision because I love my team and I love my board and obviously love the people that I serve, but I knew, just kind of like Fred, I felt like I needed to, this whole year and that fall that I had, that 2-story fall, really made me kind of reevaluate where I was and what I wanted to do with my life. And I feel like I have a greater calling than just working in the North County. I feel like I need to make a global change. And I'm really committed to and passionate about making sure that we help all children get to a place where they feel more loved and secure, and help them at the place where they need it most, and that's when their brain's developing. So I just want to say thank you, and I'll be with you at least through the end of December, probably longer, because I'll be doing the video chat and all that stuff, so you won't get rid of me that easily. But thank you to everybody and I will give $100 to our club, because that's a lot of stuff at once. So
Thanks, Colleen. Colleen felt it was important that she tell us herself, as opposed to reading about it in the Tribune or in a press release. So we asked that everybody keep it under wraps until the press release comes out. 4-way test, is it beneficial to all, right? Is it the truth? So Colleen, thank you, and we're not going to let you go too easily. Trust me.
You're welcome.
So,
go Fred.
Dr. Mucci, anybody else have any? Pardon me? All right. Edward, would you like to introduce our guest speaker?
Yes, we have Dr. Richard Mucci, who attended College of St. Paul, Minnesota in the 60s, medical college in Wisconsin, was a general medical internship in Ramsey County in St. Paul, Minnesota, was a general surgery residence and military service to United States Public Health Service in San Francisco, and practiced medicine in Healdsburg in vascular medicine and surgery from the mid-70s to 2006. And he's now retired, and he's going to talk about some interesting things.
Am I on?
You're on.
Oh, well, good morning, everybody. And I want you to know that I'm really honored to be here and to be asked to do this. And first, I'll give you a little bit of background as to how it all happened before I get into the talk. And a couple of years ago, my son-in-law, who was living with our daughter here in our house, started this weird diet called the ketogenic diet. And he was eating tons and tons of fat. And it intrigued me enough to know that my daughter would probably be a widow in 3 years because of eating all this fat. He'd die of a heart attack in a couple of years. And I decided, well, I better learn about this diet so that I can talk him out of it. And this talk is actually going to be the journey of what I learned in doing that research. And so now I'm going to go to screen share here. Okay. Okay, So we'll start out with a little bit of a news flash, and that is that only 12% of Americans are considered metabolically healthy, according to a study done by the University of North Carolina. In addition, the AMA, in one of their headlines on an internet site, said that life expectancy in the United States is continuing to decline and has declined for at least the last 3 years. And the major reason for this is something that was originally named Syndrome X, but is now called Metabolic Syndrome. So what is Metabolic Syndrome? Well, Metabolic Syndrome is a combination of any three of the following criteria. And there's a few other ones too, but these are the major ones. Abdominal obesity, that's obesity around our lower middle. Hardening of the arteries, hypertension, glucose intolerance, high triglycerides, and low HDL. Those are markers of heart disease. Pro-inflammatory state. Inflammation is considered the root of almost all chronic diseases. And some inflammatory states that you might be aware of are things like rheumatoid arthritis, celiac disease, etc. And a prothrombotic state, which is abnormal blood clotting, which could lead to things like stroke. So the root cause of metabolic syndrome is hormonal, and it's primarily related to the hormone insulin, and more specifically, insulin resistance. Some of the consequences besides those mentioned above would include things like fatty liver disease, cataracts. Alzheimer's is now being called in some circles type 3 diabetes because of its relationship to insulin. Dental problems can be a problem. There is one amputation of some part of the lower extremity every 20 minutes in the United States, and most of those are due to metabolic syndrome. How prevalent is this? Well, here's some facts about America. 10% of all Americans are diabetic. Over 100 million adult Americans are pre-diabetic. 800,000 of us have a stroke every year. 160 million Americans are overweight or obese. 1 in 3 adults have hypertension. 40% of us have or will have heart disease. The same number holds for cancer. And 1 in 3 seniors will die with some form of dementia. The significant part about this is most of these diseases were virtually unheard of prior to 1900. Something happened around then that has changed everything. So metabolic syndrome is really such a predominant problem that it's actually breaking our healthcare system from a financial perspective and from a manpower perspective. Here's some facts. We borrowed $88 billion in 2018 to pay for costs that were not covered by insurances. The total burden of type 2 diabetes is over $400 billion annually in the United States. Cardiovascular disease costs us $350 billion, cancer another $250, and obesity $150 billion. Currently, we spend 17% of our GDP, or $3.4 trillion, on healthcare, and it is estimated that by 2050, we'll be spending $20 trillion on healthcare, or 37% of our GDP. So in effect, what we're doing is we are pricing our society out of existence by healthcare. Here's some other facts that we're all aware of. High cholesterol equals heart disease. Calories in versus calories out determines whether we lose weight or gain weight. Type 2 diabetes is a progressive disease and cannot be reversed. In fact, Kaiser Permanente has a policy that says that type 2 diabetes is only able to be cured about 0.1% of the time. Eating fat makes you fat. We all know that. Saturated fats are unhealthy. Polyunsaturated fats are healthy. Hypertension is caused by too much salt. We should eat 6 to 12 servings of fruits and veggies and 8 to 10 servings of grains per day. It's best to eat 6 small meals per day, and overweight people lack the discipline to eat less and to exercise more. The problem with this is that almost all of these, there is strong evidence to show that they're incorrect. So how did we get to such a metabolically unhealthy state? Well, it really started around 1900, but it came to a head and became noticeable in 1955 when President Eisenhower had his first of 8 heart attacks. By the 1980s, it was considered that we had an epidemic of heart disease, And George McGovern actually called a congressional hearing to determine what we could do about it. And he asked a few prominent scientists of the day to testify before him, before the committee. One of the main ones that he asked was a guy by the name of Ansel Keys. And Ansel Keys was a researcher out of the University of Minnesota. And he published something called the 7-country study. And in those 7 countries, what he found was those countries that ate high volumes of fat had high incidence of heart disease, and those countries that had low volumes of fat in their diet had low incidence of heart disease. The only trouble with the study is that he actually surveyed 29 countries, and there were many of those that had high fat diets and low incidence of heart disease, and others that had low fat diets and high incidence of heart disease. However, he sincerely believed that saturated fat and cholesterol were the cause of heart disease, and so he just kind of ignored the data that didn't fit his theory. That eventually led to the creation of dietary guidelines by the government, which morphed into the food pyramid, which is now the food plate. And that food pyramid said we should eat a low-fat diet. We should eat about 300 grams of carbohydrate per day. And 300 grams is really the equivalent of about 60 teaspoons of sugar per day. Now, all carbs are not created equal, but that being said, 60 teaspoons of sugar equivalent is a heck of a lot of sugar. So what did we do in America? Well, we were very good lemmings. We followed the guidelines, and we did exactly what we were told to do. We reduced our red meat consumption, we reduced our eggs, we reduced all kinds of things, and we increased our fresh fruit and fresh veggies. We increased our consumption of polyunsaturated oils, decreased animal fats, we decreased butter consumption. We even exercised more. But in spite of that, 50% of women currently are on a diet at any given time, and 90% of our teenagers try to diet regularly because of this overweight problem. And the end result of this is our obesity has climbed dramatically since these guidelines were actually produced in the 1970s. And one of the reasons for that is because of all the processed foods that we eat. The food companies really loved this kind of program because they could create all kinds of processed foods, and they were able to export these foods to the rest of the world, along with exporting our dietary guidelines. And as you can see, the rest of the world is really catching up to us with respect to the obesity. These are some other graphs, and these all started their climb upward around the time that the dietary guidelines came out. Cancer mortality rates rose. Alzheimer's disease climbed significantly. Type 2 diabetes climbed significantly. Obesity climbed significantly. And as you can see, all these graphs are virtually identical. Most of them begin in the 60s and 70s when the progression upward began. So this guy thinks that, excuse me, that metabolic syndrome is caused by global warming, but I tend not to agree. This is really when it began was in the early 1800s when we began importing lots and lots of sugar and producing lots of sugar. And that curve continued to climb until World War II when it flattened out, but after that it continued to climb more. More and more sugar was consumed by the American public. Grain production has also increased significantly, and the reason that's important to know is because the primary nutrient in grains is starch. And starch is nothing more than one sugar molecule attached to another sugar molecule attached to another sugar molecule. Currently in this country, we consume 152 pounds of sugar per year. That's almost a half a pound per day. There are over 200 labeling names that can be used in processed foods to identify sugar, and these are just some of them. And the reason that they have so many names is really so that they can hide how much sugar is in the processed food that we're eating. So sugar is a problem, but what about cholesterol and saturated fat? We've all been told that those things are awful too. Well, 60% of all Americans admitted to the hospital with an acute heart attack have normal or low cholesterol, and that's based on a study of 400,000 consecutive hospital admissions for heart attacks. 75% of us who have any kind of heart disease have normal or low cholesterol. When I started doing this program for the Windsor Club, the club that I belong to, they said, we really want to see that you have studies that back up what you're saying. We don't want you to be just getting information off some blog on the internet. So these are just some studies, and they all basically list out that saturated fat and cholesterol have absolutely nothing to do with coronary artery disease or heart attacks. These are just some more. And this one here in the middle is particularly interesting because it was also done by Ansel Keys, the guy who did the 7-country study and only reported on 7 of the 29. He took 9,000 inmates of prisons and mental institutions in Minnesota. This was back in the 1970s. And half of them he fed a very low-fat diet. The other half ate their regular diet. At the end of the study, what it showed was that there was a higher risk of death as your cholesterol went down. That's probably something you never heard of before. Now, he did this study, but he never published it. And he never published it because it didn't agree with his opinion of what was the cause of heart disease. It was the data was discovered in in about 2016, and it was republished with the complete results. This is another study where 192 countries were analyzed, and they compared the death rate to the cholesterol rate, and they found that as the cholesterol went up, the death rate went down. This was in men, this is in women. This is another meta-analysis, which is 76 different studies with 650,000 participants, and it showed that high saturated fat intake had no increase in heart risk. So that's not the culprit. The culprit is the carbohydrates, particularly sugars and refined grains. They're the cause, but they're not the disease. So this is kind of what happens when we eat. If we eat carbohydrates, our blood sugar goes up. That stimulates our body to make insulin, which then lowers the blood sugar. Insulin regulates our blood sugar. If we eat protein, protein gets broken down to some extent and produced into glucose, and that is called gluconeogenesis. And so that stimulates a little bit of insulin release, but it goes up much slower and it comes down much slower. If we eat fat, there's almost no increase in glucose, and therefore no production of insulin. Insulin does other things besides balancing blood sugar levels, however. It causes the body to deposit something called glycogen, which is just stored glucose in the liver and muscle. We currently have about 1 day's worth of glycogen in our body, and that's about the maximum amount we can store. So any carbohydrate we eat more than the amount that we can store gets deposited in the liver as fat. Once the liver is full of fat, that's the insulin stimulates the fat cells in the rest of our body to store more fat and get bigger. The last thing insulin does is it stops us from burning fat. It totally stops the burning of fat as fuel. So what this is telling us is that we really can't get fat unless we have high insulin levels, and we can't get thin unless we lower our insulin levels. So this is just a little a schematic on how insulin resistance starts. And it's primarily the fatty liver that leads to the insulin resistance, and we get the fatty liver because of the high insulin levels. Insulin resistance is nothing more than our body organs failing to respond to normal amounts of insulin and requiring excesses. And this resistance mechanism is very common in the body. For instance, we get resistance to alcohol. All of a sudden, if we drink a lot of alcohol, we need more and more to get the buzz. The same happens with analgesic drugs and narcotics. We develop resistance to them. This is just a graph of kind of how insulin resistance happens. As we eat more and more carbohydrates, our insulin starts going up, but our blood sugar remains low and we can keep it under control. But all of a sudden we develop something called pancreatic fatigue, and we can no longer produce enough insulin to keep our blood sugar levels at a normal level. So our blood sugars start climbing. We get a blood test that shows we have high glucose levels, high sugar levels, and we get diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. But as you can see, we've actually been sick for 10 years with prediabetes before it ever becomes manifest. And that's because not too many people actually test for prediabetes. Other hormones are affected by insulin. Insulin resistance decreases the production of ghrelin, which is a hormone that stimulates us to feel full. And it also causes leptin resistance, and leptin is a hormone that inhibits our appetite. So if that's inhibited, we're going to feel hungry a couple of hours after we eat meals. And so particularly when we eat high carbohydrate meals, we get hungry a few hours later. Fructose is a very special kind of sugar because fructose does not cause our insulin levels to go up. The only thing that happens to fructose is it goes directly into the liver. And the only thing the liver can really do with it is produce fat out of it. So the fructose stimulates fatty liver disease, which increases our insulin resistance and leads us to metabolic syndrome. So traditionally, with much of our healthcare, we actually do symptom care. For instance, if you come in and you're diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, you're likely to be given a medication that stimulates insulin production to lower your blood glucose. Well, as we've learned from the previous few slides, if you get more insulin, you're going to only aggravate the insulin resistance. Hypertension is another one. Much hypertension is caused by insulin resistance, although not all of it, obviously. But the treatment for hypertension is giving a medication to lower the blood pressure, but it doesn't treat the disease itself. It just treats the symptom of high blood pressure. So it is possible to cure insulin resistance, but in order to do that, you have to lower your insulin level because insulin is really miracle grow for our fat cells. So it's pretty simple. If the problem is too much insulin, the solution is lower your insulin. But how do you do that? Well, pretty much diet is about the only option that you have. There are no really good medications that are either very effective or reasonable in price that can allow you to lower your insulin resistance. So you can do such things as a starvation diet, a very low calorie diet, or have bariatric surgery. You're not eating a lot of calories, so you're not stimulating a lot of insulin, and it allows your body to recover from the insulin resistance. You can go on to a low or moderate carb diet, such as the Atkins diet or the paleo diet. And if you're mildly insulin resistant, chances are you're going to do yourself a big favor by avoiding sugars and starches and going on these diets. If you have one of these metabolic syndrome diseases that are significant in your life, like heart disease, high blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, you can do something like my son-in-law did called ketogenic metabolic therapy, which is a diet that's about 20 grams to 50 grams of total carbs per day. It's high in fat, and that works extremely well, and it can reverse your insulin resistance. Vegans can do this also, but they have to do it in a very specific way. They have to consume pretty much only whole foods. It can't work in a vegan, particularly with no sugar, if they're eating any kind of sugars or starches or processed foods. They also shouldn't be eating seed oils. And many of the vitamins are not absorbed real well out of vegetables. And so you have to take some vitamin supplementation if you're a vegan most of the time. You can improve the results of any of these with something called intermittent fasting, which means that you fast most of the day, 16 to 18 hours, and you eat only during a 6 to 8 hour window. But regardless of what you decide to do, you should be eating whole foods. You should be avoiding sugars and starches. You should be avoiding processed foods. And you should be avoiding most vegetable oils. We've been told that vegetable oils are good for preventing heart disease, but there really is no evidence to that effect. And one of the side effects of vegetable oils is that they increase the risk for cancer. But that's pretty much ignored because we've all been taught that they help prevent heart disease. The oils you should eat are things like avocado oil, olive oil, coconut oil, palm oil, macadamia oil, animal fats like lard and things like that, duck fat are just fine, and they really have no effect on heart disease. This is an interesting study that was done out of a group out of San Francisco. They took 350 patients with type 2 diabetes, and 87 of them were placed on the diet recommended by the American Diabetic Association. The others were placed on a low-carb diet. These are the results at the end of 1 year. Those that were on the low-carb diet lost about 30 pounds. 92% of them were off of all their insulin. 100% of them were off of all their oral diabetic meds. 70% of them had their hemoglobin A1C below the diabetic level. There's a 25% reduction in triglycerides and an 18% increase in HDL. And those are markers of heart disease, probably the best markers out of a lipid panel. And that's exactly what you want to see happen. Out of the biomarkers that are available for inflammation and heart disease, 22 of the 26 were significantly improved. And those 4 that weren't improved were better. They just didn't reach the state of statistical significance. The cardiac calcium score is a CT scan of the heart, which shows calcium, which is indicative of heart disease. And in many of those people, that was reversed. Prescription costs were reduced by over 70% in these patients. The study is now being carried out in its 3rd year, and the data has continued to remain consistent. As you can see, those on the diet recommended by the Diabetic Association had no change at all. This is another interesting study where they took a group of people. Half of them were placed on a low-fat, high-carbohydrate diet. The other half did just the opposite, low-carb, high-fat. They all ate exactly the same number of calories per day. They did that for 3 months, and at the end of 3 months, they all switched. Those that were high-carb became low-carb. Those that were high-fat became low-fat. They were followed for another 3 months, and at the end of the study, what they showed was, and remember, all these people were eating exactly the same number of calories. Those that ate the low-carb diet, the high-fat diet, burned 324 more calories per day at rest than those that ate the low-fat, high-carb diet. That 324 calories amounts to about 30 pounds of weight per year that they could have lost. So here's what we learned. Number 1, sugar isn't good. We all knew that. Carbs aren't very good for us either. Carbs are responsible for increasing insulin secretion, which can lead to fatty liver and insulin resistance. Insulin resistance induces fat accumulation and it stops fat burning. Processed carbohydrates produce excess fat accumulation, and metabolic syndrome is a hormonal disease with a greatly exaggerated insulin response, which is called insulin resistance. So here's the bottom line of what you can do. You should eat a low insulin stimulation diet. That means eating whole foods, eliminating processed foods, avoid sugars and starches, eliminate polyunsaturated oils and trans fats. We all know about the trans fats. Don't fear good fat, including saturated fat. It is not bad for you. If you're overweight, obviously you should lose weight. We all know that that's a difficult problem, and it seems that the most effective treatment happens to be the low-carb, high-fat metabolic therapy type diet. If you're eating carbs, there have been a couple of studies that show that if you eat your protein about 10 to 15 minutes before you eat your carbs, the insulin production is muted a little bit. And so your insulin level goes up a little slower and it comes down a little bit slower. So you don't get as much impact from your insulin as far as developing insulin resistance. but the result is relatively low. Do some intermittent fasting. That means, again, fasting for 16 to 18 hours per day and eliminating snacks between meals. Exercise is great. We should all do it. However, it's not particularly effective for weight loss. And we all know that. Everybody's been on a diet at one point. They've tried to exercise. And most often we gain the weight back in spite of doing all that. You want to lower your fasting insulin levels. And my suggestion to most people is when you go to your doctor, ask them for the following 4 tests. Because if they are in good shape, then odds are highly likely that you are metabolically reasonably healthy. 1, get a fasting insulin level. Get your hemoglobin A1C measured. Get your triglycerides and your HDL measured. And keep your triglycerides below 100, your HDL above 70, your hemoglobin A1C below 5.5, and your insulin level below 5. If you do that, you're going to be in pretty darn good shape. You should reduce stress in any possible way and try to get 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night, because stress and lack of sleep causes cortisol production, and that stimulates the release of glucose into the blood, which stimulates insulin production, which can lead to insulin resistance. And by all means, if you do any of this stuff, make sure you let your doctor know what you're doing. Especially if you're taking medications, because there have been people who have gone on the very low carb diets, and they found that their blood pressure is down within a matter of days, or their blood sugars are down to normal within a matter of days. And if they continue taking their medications the way they always have, they will get quite ill from it. And it can be very dangerous. So your doctor is going to be necessary to help you lower your medications and control your dosages if you're going to do this. So these are just some references that you can do that are reading lists. They're all incredibly well documented. They review all the studies, both pro and con, about what I'm talking about today. And they're done by well-respected researchers and journalists. This is me. This is my phone number. This is my email address. If anybody has any questions or comments, they're more than welcome to give me a call or to email me. I'm even willing to help you out and talk with you a little bit afterwards, and do a little bit of coaching or whatever you want, if you want. So I'm going to go off of screen sharing, and if there's time, I'll answer any questions, and we'll go on from there.
Wow, that is like worthy of an 8-hour presentation. Thank you so much.
My voice is going hoarse.
So we have a little time for questions. Does anybody have any, or maybe you want to follow up with Dr. Mucci? I'll open it up for questions.
Also, I'll just let you know that if you want, I will email you, Nancy, a PDF copy of the slideshow, and you can distribute that to the members.
That would be wonderful. I do have a question. Years ago, I was a sheep rancher, and I looked into the effects of meat, lamb specifically, and I read a book called Fats That Heal and Fats That Kill. Are you familiar with that book?
No, I'm not.
Okay, well, it kind of boiled it down to what you were saying, but I learned that grass-fed animals were healthier, though, than the ones that are shoved non-natural foods down their gullets.
Yeah, absolutely. The grass-fed is probably going to be healthier for you than the meat that comes out of the feedlots, and that's because they lack a lot of antibiotics, which leads to our body having antibiotic resistance, and they lack the hormones that are used to stimulate growth. And if you think about it, the whole talk was about getting fat from eating carbs. And how do they fatten up those cows and sheep and things like that? They feed them grain.
Right.
And so, yeah, you really would like to avoid those. The grass-fed beef does taste a little bit different. It has a little more gamey taste. Some people like that better. It's not as mild. It is more expensive, and if you're on a budget, you're still better off eating the meats from the feedlots than you are eating a high-carb diet, in my opinion.
Okay. Well, we'll look forward to getting your PDF, and I'll share it with the members and our spouses. That was really interesting. I don't know what else to say. I'm with you. Let's get healthy, everybody. We can do it. Remember?
That's right.
We can do it. So I want to thank you profusely, Dr. Mucci, for your presentation, and we will be making a donation to our Polio Plus eradication program in your name.
Wow, thank you.
As our thank you to you. And I'd like to thank Dr. Marguglio for joining us, Tom Tevendale for coming back, and anybody else I'm missing. I think those were our guests. Next week, Edward has secured, I should say, Dusty Estes for our speaker. She's going to be talking about the Healdsburg farm to pantry. So I think we're all going to look forward to that. If there are no other questions, comments, announcements, I am going to adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye. Thank you.